Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending the session today. My name is Debbie Sasko. I'm the AVP of Information Services, and I also have Sherry Parnell here with me, who is one of our program managers. What we wanted to do today is give the facility operators an overview of our Intermodal driver database. We know that you all get UIA data from us now under the terminal feed service, but we wanted to make you aware of our driver information that's also available. You'll see on the screen that there's a listing of all of the various information services that IANA offers. We have our UIA service in the center here. That's the original program that IANA had developed and is the interchange agreement that establishes the terms for the interchange of intermodal equipment between trucking companies and equipment providers, which would be the ocean, rail, and leasing companies. From that, the UIA, we had several services that sprung off of that, one of them being the terminal feed service that you currently receive data where we send you UIA motor carrier status information based on equipment providers designating you to receive that information. We also recently had another service come off of the UIA, which is our street interchange application, which provides an online web portal to automate and streamline the facilitation of street turns and street interchanges between EPs and motor carriers under the UIA. It also provides an electronic record of the transfer of liability, damage, and indemnification under the UIA agreement between those parties. So if there's any question as to when that transfer occurred, there's always an electronic record that the parties can go back to find out that information. The second program that came off of the UIA was the Intermodal driver database that we're going to talk about today. So we'll talk a little more in detail about that in just a minute. We also have our gear application, which is a virtual equipment identification and marking program for intermodal equipment. And what we do under that program is we use the intermodal equipment provider's unique alphanumeric equipment ID, as well as tie that to the intermodal equipment provider's USDOT number to identify the responsible IEP under the federal regulations. We have over 650,000 chassis registered in that database, representing over 100 IEPs that have equipment registered in our gear database. Roadside enforcement also uses gear to confirm the identification of the IEP for roadside inspection purposes, and our actual gear online public inquiry is embedded into the FMCSA's Aspen system for that specific purpose. In addition, we have our driver vehicle inspection report service, where under this program, it's basically used by the domestic business. The railroads use that service. Advent has a similar service that handles the marine community DVIRs, but under our service, it hits our three application databases, gear, to identify the IEP for the DVIR. It hits our IDD, our driver database, to identify the driver for the electronic signature of the driver, and also our UIA database to, of course, identify the motor carrier by their USDOT number. The DVER service is our driver vehicle examination report service, where we have a link with FMCSA where they provide us with information on the driver vehicle examination report, which is the roadside citation that is provided to the motor carrier during inspection. We then provide that information to the parties that are subscribed to our DVER service. We provide a copy of that information to them via email with a PDF attachment of the actual DVER, or if the party wants to receive the information via XML, they can also get it in that format as well. And then lastly, we have our BOES application, which is our bad order equipment status service, which provides a standard method of communicating equipment status information between facility operators, maintenance and repair vendors, as well as intermodal equipment providers. And it assists in preventing equipment that's in a bad order condition from leaving the facility. So that's just kind of a brief overview of all of our services. Certainly, if you're interested in learning any more about any of the other services, you can certainly contact our office, and we'll be happy to provide you some more detail on those. So let's move forward in regards to this demo, which is specific to the IDD. This next slide here just kind of gives you an overview of some of the statistics that are related to the services that I just mentioned. Under our UIA program, we have over 7,500 motor carriers, 54 equipment providers. The terminal feed service, which is the service that you receive data from our office under, we send that data over 95 of the major terminals in the United States and some also in Canada. Our intermodal driver database that we're going to talk about today, we have over 430,000 active drivers in that database. There's over 2 million in total, which includes drivers that are in inactive status as well. And that represents 7,600 motor carriers that have registered these drivers. Again, I mentioned earlier that we have over 650,000 chassis in our global intermodal equipment registry, and then these are just some statistics on the other two services, the DVIR and the DVER. The Intermodal Driver Database, some of the benefits associated with it. One of the recent items that has been discussed at some of our UIA meetings, which the Intermodal Interchange Executive Committee is the group that oversees the UIA, and it's comprised of rails, ocean carriers, and motor carriers. And out of those discussions recently, one of the items that was brought to our attention from the ocean carriers on that committee was the fraudulent use of SCAC codes and the problem that persists when that occurs. So our driver database would be a way to assist with that issue by simply checking the IDD. You could confirm whether the driver that's accessing the facility is actually registered by the motor carrier SCAC that they're coming in on behalf of. Currently, right now, the 4 Class 1 railroads use our IDD for that specific purpose, confirmation of the driver for facility access. So that would definitely assist with preventing the use of fraudulent SCAC codes. Potential to increase cargo unit visibility and theft prevention, as well as to help reduce vehicle queue times at the gate. It is a centralized web interface for motor carriers, so it's very simple for them to go in and not only check their UIA status information, but also manage their driver rosters within our intermodal driver database, as it's all done under a single web interface. And then again, it provides real-time access to the over 400,000 active drivers that are in the database for those that subscribe to the service. We also have a license state formatting check that is done within the IDD. So when a company registers a driver, we have a validation that checks the license format to make sure it's in the correct format for that specific state of where the license is issued. We do automated notifications to motor carriers that have their drivers registered in the IDD. So if we see that they have a driver that has a license expiration coming up within 30 days, we notify them of that and encourage them to go in and update that information. And then we also have no activity notifications that we send out. So we do a check, and if there's been no activity on an account within 30 days, we generate a notice to that company letting them know, that encouraging them to go out and make sure that their driver information is up to date. All of the information in the IDD is motor carrier furnished. Some of the, like I indicated earlier, the railroads use our IDD. They subscribe to it for the purposes of facility access to confirm driver information, and they have actually put provisions within their UIA addendum that requires that the motor carrier register their drivers in the IDD. So there's an obligation there within the UIA that kind of ties the IDD to it, because they're required to maintain their drivers in the IDD for that purpose. Again, I mentioned that it's a centralized and secure database. They register through the web interface. And we also have the ability to, for larger companies that have large volumes of drivers, we have the ability for them to set up automatic updates of that information. So we call them auto IDD updates, where the company can establish FTP credentials with us and then submit their drivers to us electronically anytime they add a driver or terminate an existing driver, or any type of change that occurs in that driver record. They can automatically transmit that information to our office versus going through the web interface. The IDD would have a direct link to the terminal feed data that we send you, because it will allow you to not only be aware of the motor carrier company status with the equipment provider they're trying to come in and pick up equipment or move equipment for, but it would also allow you to identify whether that driver coming into the facility is actually a registered driver for the motor carrier he's stating he's coming in on behalf of. And a unique record in the IDD is the motor carrier SCAC code, as well as the license number and the license state. You can have drivers that drive for multiple companies, of course, so each unique record would be identified by that combination of the motor carrier SCAC license number and the license state. The 4 Class 1 railroads that I've mentioned earlier that use our system are BNSF, CSX, Norfolk Southern, and Union Pacific. All of them have been using the IDD for quite a while, and I have had very positive comments in regards to the use of it. I think when we were discussing this at the last UIA meeting with the Intermodal Interchange Executive Committee, Union Pacific had indicated specifically that they do not incur a lot of misuse of fraudulent SCAC codes because of the fact of the check that they do of the driver information before allowing the driver to enter the facility. So very positive feedback from the 4 Class 1 railroads on the use of the IDD. Communication methods, the driver information is available via EDI or XML feed. We have an API web service and a web portal user interface that allows to do an online query if that's the option that a company would want or a subscriber would want to choose to access the information. The purpose of this actual webinar today is because we wanted to make the marine community aware of the IDD, because we have not had a lot of interest from the marine community in regards to the driver database, but we really feel that there's a benefit there for the marine community as well, so we wanted to make you aware that the service was out there. Here's a sample record of the driver database record layout. The information that is contained in that is the SCAC code of the motor carrier company, the hire date of the driver. If there's a termination date, the company would enter the termination date, and that would be transmitted. Dispatch office, we do make each motor carrier before they're registering a driver. They have to assign that driver to a dispatch office. It could be, it's just a simple location and phone number that they're asked to put in the system. The driver's first name, middle initial, and last name, license, state, country, expiration date, and then, of course, the timestamp on the record of when the record was changed or updated. Here's a sample of an API query for just the driver lookup. So if a company would just want to do a query for driver information, they would provide us with the driver license number and license state, as well as the motor carrier SCAC, or alternatively, they could provide us with the driver PIN number. IANA's IDD assigns a unique IDD PIN number for every driver that's registered in the system. So for every unique record, which again is the SCAC, license, and license state, the system assigns what we call an IANA IDD PIN number, and that can be used in lieu of providing the license state, but most of the subscribers use the license and license state combo to check information in the IDD. The return is available in the JSON response or the XML response, where we're going to return the driver's first and last name. We'll return back the license and license state that was the input entry fields, as well as the expiration date of the license, and then whether that particular driver is an active driver for that motor carrier SCAC that the subscriber was asking for. So it's going to tell you whether that driver is registered for that motor carrier SCAC. We also have an API query that will return also the terminal feed data that you currently get. So instead of getting the EDI feed that you get now, you would be able to give us the motor carrier SCAC code, the EP SCAC that you're checking for, as well as the driver's license and license state. We would then check our system, and we would come back and give you the EP, letting you know whether the EP was an active participant in the UIIA, whether that motor carrier was active for that particular EP, as that would be your yes-no block in the EP terminal feed. We provide you with the contact information as we do in the terminal feed for the motor carrier, as well as the expiration date of the 4 primary policies, just as we do in the EDI feed that we would send you for the terminal feed service. And then in addition to that, you would get the driver information, where you would be able to determine whether that specific driver was actively registered for that motor carrier SCAC, and then it would give you the basic details on that driver as well. On our website, we have this map that we maintain on our public website that shows the breakdown of the IDD. It's a real-time map that will show you the breakdown by region of the drivers registered in the Intermodal driver database. So anytime you go out to our website, if you go under the About Information Services tab, there's a selection for IDD, the Intermodal driver database. If you go to that page, this will refresh every time you go to that page to give you a new breakdown based on the current registration in the driver database. For those that would want to use the online query, which is the web interface, this particular screen here is showing you the actual driver registration screen. So if I'm a motor carrier and I'm coming in to register a driver, I'm going to log into my UIA account. This is the screen that they see. They would be asked to add a dispatch office first, or simply they're going to be asked for the terminal name or the location of their dispatch office and the telephone number. And then they would go to a detailed screen where they would be asked to fill in certain specific fields that are mandatory, others are not. Mandatory fields are the BNSF PIN number, which is a PIN number that they assign to their driver if they're doing business at BNSF. Driver's first and last name are mandatory, as well as the license state, hiring date, and dispatch phone number, which is a drop-down selection from the dispatch offices that they added previously. And then we also have the license expiration date. And then a termination date would be provided, of course, if the driver had been terminated. The other information on the screen is all optional information, but it is available for the companies to complete if they wish to provide that information to us. But we have specific fields that are mandatory that they have to provide us. If a company or a subscriber would want to subscribe to the IDD via the online query and use the web interface, there is an option on our UIA website for a subscription user. We would provide them with credentials where they would be able to access the application. You're allowed to have secondary users assigned under the master user on the account, and then subscribers themselves would set up the secondary users. We would just set up the master user. When you would log into the web query screen, if you were just doing or set up to do just driver information, you would enter the motor carrier SCAC and the driver's license number, and then our system would return the status of the driver for that SCAC code, the hire date and termination date if there was one available in regards to the termination date, the status of the motor carrier SCAC and the UIA for the base agreement requirement. So this is basically going to tell you if this motor carrier SCAC is an active UIA participant, not what their status is for a specific equipment provider, but only if they're active in the UIA, and then the contact details for that specific motor carrier. Another type of query that can be performed is by driver license search. So the subscriber can enter for the motor carrier SCAC instead of entering a specific SCAC code. They can enter the default of UIA and then enter the first 7 digits of the license number. And then what our system will return is any driver that we have that matches those criteria in the IDD. So it'll give you the information, driver's first, last name, their license number, license date, and hire date. So you'd be able to see that along with the SCAC codes that those drivers are registered for. Another type of search, if you're using the web inquiry and you wanted both driver and terminal feed service information, where you wanted to know the UIA status information as well, which is what you currently get under the terminal feed service, then you would enter the motor carrier SCAC, driver's license, and the EP SCAC. The license state is optional, but you would have to enter these 3 pieces of information. And then what we're going to return is we're going to return information letting you know what that motor carrier SCAC combo with the EP SCAC, what their status is with that particular equipment provider, which is what you currently get under your EP block on the terminal feed service. We'll give you the contact information for the motor carrier, of course, and then the 4 primary expiration dates as you get on the terminal feed service information. And then we will also advise you whether that particular driver, who that driver, what their first and last name is, and if they're active for that specific SCAC code. So that's kind of a quick overview of our terminal feed service. We have various ways that the information can be provided to you as a terminal on behalf of a marine ocean carrier. If you're interested in learning more about the various options that we could provide that data, feel free to reach out to me. There is cost if you're subscribing to the IDD. It depends on how you would want to get the data. So certainly if you're interested in it, you can contact me and we can provide you with some additional information in regards to the cost of the service. Thank you all very much. Have a nice day. We appreciate you taking your time this afternoon.